so why we're ready to go.
He was in my Sunday school class.
No, you're nice.
Good. Was it a mess after?
Well, I had a little contributed to it, so
Yeah.
there was some popcorn.
Okay.
Rolling. Everybody call this March 19th, 2012 meeting of the Frankfort City Board of Commissioners to order. It is 12:30 p.m. Clerk, please call roll.
Mr. Wilder,
Here.
Commissioner Hadden, Commissioner Turner,
Here.
Commissioner May,
Here.
Mayor Grant.
Thank you. First item on the agenda is citizen comments. This is a relatively informal meeting, so anybody who's here on business that's on the agenda is welcome to wait until we're actually addressing that agenda item to take part in the discussion. Although if anybody has anything they want to go ahead and say now, you're more than welcome to.
Do you want us to wait on garbage?
I mean, we can actually just have a conversation when we get to that. That's the first agenda item. So seeing none, we'll move on to staff reports.
None what?
Oh, citizen comments?
Oh. You know, not yet, maybe. Depends on what I hear.
Come take a seat.
Okay, well, I had two issues and I can do it in 3 minutes, I swear. So I hope you won't make me come back because sustainability is not on this. May I make a comment about that?
Anybody's welcome to comment on anything that isn't
Oh,
on
I
the agenda.
thought you said it had to be on here.
No, I'm saying,
Okay. All righty.
Everyone, please identify yourself for the record.
Oh, I need to get closer. My name's Debbie Bramlett. I'm a resident of Frankfort, and I work part-time for the Parks Department. I'm the outreach coordinator, a job that I absolutely love. I just have two comments as far as the garbage and the landlord-tenant things. Mr. Bullock and I talked earlier, and he made it clear, and I believe him, there are legal obligations and moral obligations. I would love to see those things be meshed. I had some rental property in Covington some time back, and my lease required my tenants to recycle, and they could lose their apartment if they didn't. And I think that that's important, and it shows that the landlord cares, and at the same time, it puts the onus on the tenant if he's going to lose his apartment for not recycling, but the onus is still, as it is now, the landlord is responsible if he doesn't follow up. So that's all I have to say about that. As far as reading that you have decided to hire a full-time sustainability coordinator, I've been here almost 6 years and have been repeatedly told that there were no new hiring of non-essential full-time people. What troubles me is that initially this commission was satisfied to share a sustainability coordinator with two other entities, which even there would be overlap, essentially they were only going to get half, maybe a little more, of that employee's time. When the other entities decided they didn't like that arrangement, all of a sudden you all feel that you can pay a full-time sustainability coordinator. And my question would be, if it was okay to have someone half-time, why do you need someone full-time? You don't have to answer me here, I just want you to think about that. The other thing is, as a woman, and a professional woman, I can tell you, I have done job sharing as early as the 1970s. There are many well-educated, well-qualified women who want to be in the workforce and are happy at a career level job, but they also want to raise families and have more time. Somebody once in a while shakes nods, and here's what I'm saying. And then I think you could find a perfectly well-qualified individual who, might not be a man, but someone who would be willing to take the position on a part-time basis. I also think it would be very helpful if longevity pay were added for part-time people also. That might be an incentive for them too. It certainly would, I think, be fair. Anyway, that's it. Thanks. Oh, I lost my seat again.
I'm happy to address one of those concerns because there was a question in there in regards to the hiring a full-time versus part-time position. Under the original concept, we would have shared a full-time position with the plant board of the county.
Right.
According to all the research we've taken in and the experts in the field we've talked to, I'm pretty skeptical that we would get much bang for our buck out of a part-time employee. I'm sure we could find lots of people who'd be happy to take the job on a part-time basis, but it's really a full-time job. I know we could find anybody, lots of people on the street who'd be happy to do it, but
then if it's a full-time job, how would it have been a full-time for this city if we shared the individual?
It would have been worth it. It would have been, sorry.
Okay, Gibby, that's all right.
It would have, we try to be respectful and not interrupt each other here. It would have been a full-time position before. As in we would have been able to pull in a qualified expert in the field who was willing to work at a career level salary. I don't believe we could find somebody who's that professional and accomplished to work for a part-time salary, frankly. And as far as we're concerned, it's a fiscal measure. This is somebody who can reduce our energy consumption by, hopefully in the margin of 10 to 15%, which is worth way more than a full-time salary is. So this is all about saving money.
Okay. How many part-time female attorneys do you know? There are a lot of them,
Okay.
and they are professionals.
Anybody have anything? Any other comments? Great. Staff reports.
We'll start with the parks. Chief Whithoy.
No report.
Randy Dunham. Public Works.
Board.
Finance, Steve Dawson.
Sure. Just a follow-up from an email that I sent to Fred the other day. He forwarded it on to you about where we are with the budget. At the first of the month, I sent out a preliminary draft for the budget. Basically a summary sheet stating where we were so far with the input that I received from the managers. And just to give you the information, to summarize the information for you really quickly, our proposed receipts for the next budget period for 2012-2013 right now, based on what I'm seeing we've received so far, we're about almost $31 million in receipts. And so we've kind of budgeted that as our starting point for receipts. We'll know a little bit more firm about that number as we move through the budget process the next couple of months. And so far, I've got proposed expenditures of almost it's about $33.7 million. So the gap between the receipts and the expenditures are about $2.7 million. If you take the gap as a percentage of our total receipts, it's about a 9% gap. So on that summary sheet, if you're looking down through there, I've summarized some of the big items in there so you can look through there. If you've got any questions or any comments as you go through this information, please let me know. We're still working with we're going through having our management, city manager meetings right now. We've gone through about 6 departments so far. We've got a couple more left. We're going to finish those up on Wednesday. We'll be coming back with another update of the draft. We're trying to pare down the cost, and we'll let you know how that stands when we get more information. We've already come up with some things that we can pare down. That's where we are right now. Any questions or comments or?
I might have some questions when we get through some of the, after we get through the old business.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Solicitor, do you have a report?
I have a brief report to the commission. Mr. Hackbart, the city manager and I met with Mike Templeman this morning concerning the sale of the St. Clair parking garage. He's anticipated to sign the purchase sale agreement tomorrow morning at 9:30 and also provide us 5% down payment, which is pursuant to the advertisement set forth in the newspaper. So we're moving forward with that.
Chief Posich, Fire Department. Mr. Scout, Sewer Department.
Yes, I've got a last minute request. We have a provision for do a tap fee, they can finance that over time. And we had an individual come in late last week and pay off their promissory note. And I'd like to add that to the agenda for next Monday night to get that approved for signatures. There's no objections. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scout. Rebecca Hall, grants. Robbie Engel, you represent the planning code. No report.
No report, sir.
Jilson, IT.
I'll be talking about online payment with Steve later.
Later
But
on,
I have no
okay.
report.
Mayor Pro Tem, that concludes our report.
Thanks, President. Okay, well, I think most people are here to discuss the first item under old business, which is landlord-tenant issues pertaining to KSU Trail. We have a draft proposal that's been submitted by Bob Bullock here. Perhaps you care to open discussion on this policy.
Yes, please, I'm sorry.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, members of the commission, I'm here, my name is Robert Bullock. I'm here as a member of the Landlords Association of Central Kentucky. I'm here as a spokesman and not as their attorney. I'm also a rental property owner myself. We're here to ask the commission to adopt an amendment to the garbage ordinance and amend it so that the person that is responsible for a violation of the garbage ordinance is the one that receives the penalty. Our basic position is it's essentially unfair to require the landlord or property owner to be responsible for the violation of law by the tenant or renter. That just essentially and basically is unfair. It's something that the landlords feel that we just can't live with. And we're asking that you amend it so that the property owners are called exempt individuals as far as anything that they did not do, and that the code be enforced by the city instead of by the landlords. Because the way it works now is essentially the landlords are the ones that are going to have to find out who did it and somewhere or another try and collect back any fines that may have occurred. You have an individual, Mark No, who is the city inspector for that. I have found that he is very competent and has done a good job on that regard. What he has been doing, at least in cases where there's a question in my situation, is to put on, I said Mark No, didn't I? Yes. Put on rubber gloves, open up the bags, dig through the garbage and try and find the name of the individual who has the garbage. That's a good thing. If you're going to enforce it, having a garbage police, if you will, is the way to do it. And have that person cite the person that has created the violation. Now, it would appear to me that the ordinance itself is basically a two-part ordinance. The first part of the ordinance is the essential governmental service of collecting garbage. That's absolutely necessary. We can't have garbage piling up in the city. The second one, in my judgment, is not an essential governmental service, and that's the recycling portion of the ordinance. What the landlords have been getting are a series of notices, is what it's called in the ordinance, notifying us that there's been a violation. If it's not corrected, we get fined. And now the letters with the $25 fine are coming out. Most, I believe, of the notices are occurring because individuals are not complying with the recycling portion of the ordinance. They're putting trash and garbage in plastic bags and then putting them in the recycle cart as opposed to the trash cart. They are probably also setting out trash in plastic bags that are not compliant with the city's bags. I'm not exactly sure why you required a special bag for that. I have gotten one city person has told me that it was it's a revenue producing item, but I'm not familiar enough to be able to say that. But that seems to be an extreme weakness in the ordinance. We believe that the burden of proof is with the city to prove that a violation has occurred. It should not be, burden of proof should not be on the landlord to prove that he did nothing wrong. The ordinance, the proposed amendment that I have submitted to you is designed to take care of that problem. Now, we have an immediate problem, as Commissioner May had mentioned before, in that the citations are going out. And if you are going to help the landlords or property owners, rental property owners is the term I prefer, if you're going to help them, time is of the essence. And we would ask that you do it as quickly as possible. I can't think offhand of anything else I haven't said. There are numerous people here that may want to speak on this issue. But we would ask that you enact this amendment to the ordinance at the earliest possible time. Thank you.
Thank you. Unless anybody has anything else they feel needs to be added right now, I'm inclined to go ahead and open this up to discussion by the commission. But the floor will be open, so just raise your hand if you feel the need to continue contributing. I'll go ahead and offer my 2 cents. Okay, I'll offer more than 2 cents.
I thought you would.
Of course. There is a pretty, I agree that there is a problem here that needs to be addressed. I think that's clear. It has been the practice of the city for many years to hold property owners, rental property owners even, ultimately responsible for code violations that their tenants cause. If the grass goes uncut, for example, then that's a fine right now that we assess to the property owner. And I understand, a debate can be had back and forth as to how fair that is. I know that lots of property owners actually include in their lease an agreement with the tenant, where the tenant takes responsibility for cutting the grass. And in those circumstances, my sense is that it would be perfectly appropriate if the property owner is fined for something their tenant failed to do that was in their lease, that it would be perfectly appropriate for the property owner to pass that charge along to the tenant. One catch with this, as it's written, I think, is that it seems to me that the only fair thing to do is to hold the person who's paying for the service responsible for compliance. So as long as we're requiring the landlords and only the landlords to pay the garbage bills, the garbage fee, then it seems. I guess what I'm saying. Okay, let me make one more point, then I'll get back to that one. I would be, if push came to shove, I could support this. I'd be more in favor of us treating the garbage bill and the accompanying responsibilities like any other utility bill, where some landlords do take that responsibility upon themselves. They choose to pay their utility bills, and they choose to take responsibility for keeping the lights on, so to speak, and for continuing service. Whereas other landlords choose to have an arrangement with their tenants and choose to pass that responsibility and the ensuing costs along to their renters. And so my preference would be that we give landlords and renters the same options in this circumstance, where if a landlord chooses to take responsibility for this stuff, rather than pass it along, they still have the ability to do that. But if the landlord chooses to pass the bill and the responsibility along to the tenants, then they have that option as well. And then the city is dealing just directly with the tenant, and that kind of cuts out the middleman. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think one of the problems y'all are having right now is the fact that the current ordinance is requiring landlords to act as a middleman between the city and the renters and your renters. And it seems that we could maybe do some things to, if you want to, get the landlords out of the equation there and deal directly with the tenants. Well, actually, I'll just go ahead and put that on the table and see. Please.
I agree, Commissioner, or Mayor Pro Tem, and Mr. Bullock and members of the Landlords Association, that there is a bit of an issue with our ordinance as written. To give you some context as to how the commission got to that decision of putting the onus on the property owner. It was originally during the debate of this garbage ordinance reform, working with the plant board because it's the plant board keeps a fairly good database of who's tenant, who's being charged for services, et cetera, et cetera. So our original proposition was to work with the plant board in the building of this, because since they had all the information, it would allow us to actually more effectively put the charge on the consumer versus the actual property owner. And what we found was, after many attempts to try to get the plant board to work with us on this, they did not want to. Shockingly enough, So the result was how the staff felt, and how what they recommended to us was essentially what Commissioner Wilder had said earlier, was to put the onus on the property owner, and they had cited certain other instances of where, like if the grass was too tall, that would go on to the property owner as well. What I would be in favor of is something quite similar to what Commissioner Wilder had mentioned, but allowing the property owner, if you have a tenant, to fill out a form and say, we are transferring the rights or the billing of this garbage to the tenant, and then you would turn that into the city. We could update our database to say, okay, John Doe is renting here at 1 Main Street. We're going to change the billing in our system for that to that person. And then I think what that will help us do also is keep better track of which properties are rental properties. We know the apartments and the duplexes, but the single family dwellings that our rental properties, we have a very difficult time of tracking. This might better help and equip us for that, whether it be rental inspections down the road or anything like that. But I would be in favor of something like that. It still gives the property owner the right to say, okay, I'm gonna stay in control of this, or I'm gonna transfer this responsibility to the tenant. So that's sort of where my vantage point and where I sit on this issue.
Thanks, very
Just had questions for the solicitor. The draft ordinance here that Mr. Bullock had submitted, is this, I don't have chapter 50 in its entirety. Does this include the underlying language is what your new section, so you're going to just basically renumber sections, these would be?
No, there is one new section, and the other is amendments to the existing.
Section 50.15 is the new section, it should, correct?
I believe that.
That would be the new section, so I know we'd have to just redraft this.
I wasn't sure of the format.
That's okay.
I talked to Mr. Moore.
That's what I was asking.
We haven't gotten together.
I mean, I think the way you've written section 50.15, where it talks about, refers back to 5013 and 5099, or any other provisions, I don't know if those have to be, I guess we have to specifically number those, but it seems like it's well written
Thank you.
from where I'm looking at.
Mr. May, we would have to put it in the proper format.
Right.
In order for it to be an ordinance, and there would have to be some language tweaked in order to make it work with our current provisions.
So I don't have any, I mean, I think we covered it.
Well, if we could, actually, before we go much further, I think our staff have had a chance to look at this, and I don't doubt they've got their own thoughts on all of this. I think we get Jeff and Tom up here to give their 2 cents, 4 cents, 6 cents, whatever it adds up to. Coming up, I will thank you for putting together a draft here. I'd support something a little different from this, but it's really refreshing to get an actual constructive suggestion. What do you all think about all this? Please feel free to speak about it.
The draft ordinance, I guess there's a couple of thoughts. One option is to just totally do away with the enforcement of the ordinance and just leave the garbage that's in violation is one option, but that definitely has consequences of garbage piling. One other option would be you have repeated violations at one residence, rather than fining, you automatically upsize the garbage container, because obviously it's too small, to where you document how many times the violation has occurred, and if the frequency meets a certain criteria, then you would upsize the garbage container, which would give the tenant, in this case, more capacity, and give them more opportunity to stay in compliance without doing a fine. But the bigger size would be a monthly payment to the owner of that property.
Correct me if I'm wrong, I believe there's ample precedent for that in other communities that do
Yes.
this sort of thing.
So that's kind of down the middle approach where there wouldn't be a fine.
I guess, which I may join in on this conversation. I guess maybe I'm not getting the question correctly, because I think that what I would like to hear is it doable to put the onus onto the renter versus the property owner? Right now we're talking about enforcement and issues out there. So the question at hand is, particularly in this ordinance, who bears the responsibility of any enforcement or action that's taken by the city? From a solid public works standpoint, is that something that's doable? I mean, do you see if we were to put some sort of mechanism for the property owners to transfer to the renters, Are there any administrative issues you all see with that?
Well, today, the only tie we have to that parcel is the owner. And ultimately, the only way we can collect is to place a lien on that property when it sells down the road. So with the renter, there's no tie with the city. So they'll move from, one apartment to a house to, so there's no way to track or to pay up, I guess. There's no mechanism that links the tenant and the city.
I'm correct in understanding that there are civil penalties that can be assessed other than a lien, but as a matter of practical reality, doesn't ever actually get in front of a judge for them. I mean, am I misunderstanding that?
They could go in front of a judge, but the problem is, let's say for instance, you have a tenant who doesn't comply with the requirements and puts too much trash out or doesn't do the recycling right, and that tenant is issued a violation, notice violation. We have many tenants here in town that move from spot to spot, and so it's difficult. First of all, we need to know who that tenant is. And if we know who the tenant is, then we can try and serve that tenant. And if that tenant is someone that's moving around a lot, it's very difficult to serve him with a copy of a small claims complaint if you want to take him to small claims court to get him to pay the fine. And if you can't serve him, then it's, all your work is for naught. You have to be able to find someone and serve him with a copy of the complaint. And then once you have served him and gotten that person to small claims court, then, and you get, let's say you get a judgment for the costs of the small claims action and service and the fine, you're probably talking about somewhere between $80 and $125, and you have to try and collect that amount. So many times it's very difficult, and I think the landlords can agree with this. I mean, it's very difficult to collect from a tenant who really doesn't have a lot of financial resources. So you have a judgment against a person that is very difficult to enforce. And that's one of the reasons why I think the commission looked to the landlord is, they're the person who's benefiting from the rental of the property, and they're the person who owns the property, and you can find that person.
We have been having this very particular conversation for over a year now, and including this dynamic of who you want responsible for the code enforcement, for the code enforcement aspects and for the billing. And the main objection that came up to putting any responsibility on the tenant is really what we just heard, is that it's very difficult to enforce anything against a tenant, in part because we can't assess a lien against the property. The bills aren't associated with utilities, so it's not like we can cut off power or stop providing the service, because if we stop providing the service, that creates a public health hazard as far as we're trying to avoid garbage just piling up in the street. And also, it's just harder it's easier to hold rental property owners accountable because we know where you all are. we don't know where your tenants go. I mean, despite all of that, I'm still in favor of finding a way to pass this along. I realize that it's more difficult to enforce against tenants, but I still think it's right. Yeah.
I'd like to make a comment.
Please. We do ask folks to come up, identify themselves for the record, and try to get picked up by the microphone. We record all of these meetings and make them available online, so anybody can watch them. And then, of course, for the sake of the clerk keeping the minutes, we like to get it on tape.
Certainly, my name is Bruce Rankin. I'm a property manager and a resident of the city. I manage about 126 units, most of which are within the city limits. I just have a couple comments about what you've been speaking to. You reference lawn mowing and how that over the years has been fine that way. If the tenant doesn't cut the grass and I receive my notice 5 days later, chances are pretty good that the grass still hasn't been cut. so I have a chance to address that. When we get a notice through the mail about the garbage not being done properly, by the time we can go to the property, the problem no longer exists. I've had tenants tell me, I don't want to be fined for what my neighbor did. How do you address that? The enforcement thing is very difficult. I have one of the recent notices that would affect a fine, refers to the address of the building, 2009. There are 4 units in that building. It does not say what was done, it does not say which unit it was done to or by. We've already had cases where neighbors are setting stuff out at somebody else's address, trying to overcome the problems. So I just think your enforcement problem is not any easier for a landlord. And the penalty that ultimately leads to a lien against the property is grossly unfair.
And that's a comment regarding code enforcement across the board, including one.
Well, like I said, with the lawn cutting grass, that type of thing, generally you can get there before and you can see that there was a violation. And you never get that far because if you go by your property, you would know. But with this particular problem, and the other problem in relation to it is these containers, I manage buildings where there are 1-bedroom apartments on a 2nd floor. There's no place for that tenant to keep their garbage cans except in the front. There's no place in the back. There's no alley. There's no option of having a dumpster. So those are going to sit out. And so far, most of our tenants don't leave them on the street. But if it's sitting in the front, I know that doesn't make anybody happy. So that's one of the other problems. And I think that your ordinance referenced the Hispanic, if we could have language in Spanish would be beneficial also.
And that's in the works, or is that?
I think it's being approved right now, if not already complete.
Excuse me, what's in the works?
An informational brochure that's, a Spanish version of the informational brochure. We've heard from a number of landlords who are having a hard time explaining what you should and shouldn't recycle and how the program is supposed to work to non-English speaking tenants. And so we're providing some of that material in a Spanish translation.
I just want to be clear, because I heard maybe some confusion. This ordinance with the solid waste, there is a 5-day, similar to the grass, where the owners have the opportunity to go out. For example, this week, on your garbage day, if there was a violation, the tag goes on the can and a letter goes to the owner, so that both the tenant and the owner knows there's something going on. So the owner will have until the next trash day to go out and drive by the property and see what's going on, call the tenant. So they have 6 or 7 days to see what the issue is and have a chance to resolve it. So that following trash day, our code enforcement officer goes out, and if he sees the same violation that they have not corrected, that's when he sends the, they service the can or take care of the issue on the street at that point and send notice to the property owner with a $25 charge. So there is an opportunity to go out there and look and see what's going on before that service charge.
But by the time I get the letter,
Yes.
the violation is no longer there. Because the tenant also got the notice and they know enough to haul it back in or do whatever. And maybe some don't.
If the violation is, if there was a warning issue and then the violation gets dealt with within the 5 days,
Yes.
then I don't see what's the problem.
Well, that's this week. Then next week, if they do the same thing again because they don't care
The
what.
violation should be good in there. And that's why it's hard for us to distinguish. If somebody has a bag of trash and they're recycling, a renter does, and we give a notice, the notice makes its way to the renter and to the landlord. the renter deals with it that week, and then the next week, if they set out another bag of trash or recycling again, is that, it's hard to, for us to distinguish whether or not that's a continuation of the same violation or a
Well, I think
repeat.
our numbers have really decreased from when we started, I think February is when we started the enforcement of the ordinance, and our numbers of letters sent out and tagging cans, we've been doing this since January,
Sure.
have decreased, so I think the education is going very well. I think the owners are understanding the program more, the renters are understanding the program more. I think some of the main issues that I got a report today from Mr. No, is the cans being too small and repeatedly, there's 4 tenants to the apartment, and they simply can't use the small can, but to the owner of the property, it's a free can, so they'll choose that. So there's this, what they have is too small for what they have a family for, and that just becomes a repeated problem from week to week, and there's no opportunity to get the correct size can, or the can's not being brought back from the curb to the apartment. Those are the two most common, beyond the plastic bags and recycling. And those are the 3 most common issues.
And Jess actually raises a fair point, and I don't mean to point fingers or anything, but there are some circumstances where I think the onus really is on the rental property owner, where the rental property owner is covering the garbage fee and insists that their tenant only use the small cart, and that isn't large enough to suit their needs, then obviously some violations are going to occur as a result of not even giving your tenant the opportunity to get the right size cart for their waste volume. So it takes 2 to tango, right? But again, that's something that I think can be addressed by, as Commissioner Turner suggested, somehow transferring that onus to the tenant at the landlord's discretion. Because in all fairness, there are some landlords who are going to prefer to just do everything in-house themselves and to be the go-between and not pass along. I think the vast majority would like utility bills, like electric and water bills, prefer that it gets passed along to the tenant. Yeah.
May I respond?
Please.
Thank you. There's only one way to enforce this thing, if you're going to do it. And that's to go into the garbage, decide who set it out by going through the garbage and citing, hopefully, the person responsible.
Sure.
Now, I understand the problems that Mr. Moore was saying, namely of enforcement and finding tenants that move and so forth, but that's the same problem that the landlord faces. We didn't ask for this. We didn't want it. It was forced upon us. I don't know if the citizens of Frankfort really were aware of what was going on. It happened. Okay, now we need to make it so that it's fair. And the only way to do that is what Mr. Noah is doing, is put on the rubber gloves and go in there.
Sure.
It's a little dangerous if there are sharp objects. But better a professional city inspector do it than the landlords. Now, if you find the violation, then you cite the person that's responsible. That's only basic fairness. No question about it.
I agree, but if I could ask, one of the catches here is that we have some teeth in citing landlords. And I agree that we should be citing the folks responsible for causing the violation. We can cite landlords with teeth because if you all don't pay your citations or fines, then we can assess a lien against the property. I'm not saying fair or unfair, that there's some kind of teeth there. So one question that we need to address is how can we give any validity to a citation against the tenant? I'm very open to suggestion.
May I respond in part this way? Part of the problem is figuring out who actually is responsible. I had a situation in South Frankfort. The building that was cited is a duplex. Both tenants said they were not responsible. So we checked, could it be a tenant across, or a person across the street? We checked over there. That person said, wasn't me. Went up the street, Person said, well, I think it's probably a person down there that did it. They were not able to find any identifying material inside the bag. I'm not sure if they were able to do it in time because the time was running. It was placed apparently on the property line or close to the property line. We could not decide. I got hit with a $25 fee. The city then decided to rescind it. Another problem with the ordinance is there is no easy way to appeal. Somebody says you're responsible, and that's it. You go to the Franklin District Court. Franklin District Court does not have injunction power. Only the circuit court does. That's a heck of a burden for everybody. The burden has to be on the city of Frankfort. If the city of Frankfort says, I've done something wrong, then the burden is on you to prove it. And that's not happening here. As far as serving is concerned, I have felt and still feel very strongly that the Frankfort Plant Board should be required to furnish the information that the city needs and maybe the billing that the city needs to enforce this. I've asked Mr. Moore whether there's any reason why the city could not pass an ordinance requiring the Frankfort Plant Board to enforce or give the information to the enforcement officers of Frankfort. He has not been able to get back to me on that so far. I have been told by one commissioner that this commission has the power to disband the board members of the Frankfort Plant Board. I don't know that to be a fact. Again, it's a legal issue for Mr. Moore to determine. But it would seem to me that if you have the power to force the plant board to give this information, you should exercise that power with the plant board and not with us. Don't make us enforce your law. That's not fair. On the can size, there's a problem that's easily correctable, and that's that the landlord has to pay for the increase in size. If a tenant needs or wants a larger size, there should be a mechanism available whereby the tenant can pay for the additional size and be responsible for it. That's an easy one, and probably something that you should do.
Well, I think that could go hand in hand with, I think the suggestion that Commissioner Turner made is really a pretty good one. I mean, in terms of just a document signed by landlord and a renter, transferring responsibility for garbage to a given tenant, and then the tenant's responsible for the bill if they want a larger size, not the landlord. Then we know who to charge if there are violations.
Commissioner, it's not a bad idea, but I think it should go the other way. I think that if the landlord wants to assume that responsibility, he should be required to fill out the paper. It shouldn't be a negative option.
You know, practically speaking, I think that could work if we were getting the data you're talking about from the plant board in terms of knowing who lives where. That's something I'm interested in knowing, actually. Can we get that information from the plant board?
Well, let me respond to a couple of things that Mr. Ford said. First of all, he has to get the order in about 2 days' notice on getting on this.
I wasn't critical. I wasn't being critical.
Second of all is, of course, the city does have the right to disband the plant board because we created the plant board. But the plant board is a separate entity from the city, created, and it has statutory provisions that control its operation and its existence once the city creates it. And, if the city wants to look at disbanding the plant board, I can certainly get that information to the Board of Commissioners. The other thing is, I doubt that that's going to come out of the discussion. The other thing is, of course, you have to work hand in hand with sister agencies, and even though we are, the mayor is the one that appoints the members to the plant board. The plant board does have some legitimate issues with respect to adding more and more fees to its bill, because the plant board is trying to sell services as well, and the more additional cost and expense, as the commission knows, you add to that bill, then the customers start thinking, well, if I'm going to have to pay for water and sewer and garbage, et cetera, can I afford to have this bigger cable package? Can I afford to have this faster internet package? So, of course, they've got a legitimate concern about making sure people continue to purchase their services. And I think one of the things the commission did consider when looking at who was to be responsible for the violations of the garbage ordinance, what individuals are profiting from the rental of that property, and should the cost of enforcing the program to require people to pay where they don't comply, should that be borne by the people who own the property and profit from that transaction, or should it be borne by the rest of the people in the city who don't have rental property? So those are some philosophical issues that the Board of Commissioners had reviewed with respect to having a contract between the tenant and the city, whereby the tenant would come in and sign a document saying that I'm going to be responsible for the payment of the garbage fee. If the Board of Commissioners is interested in that, I would recommend that the city either consider requiring a deposit when that occurs, the payment of some type of deposit like you have with so many privately owned wastewater treatment plants, where they require their customers to pay deposits, so that in the event that they don't pay, then there's a ready source of funds available to pay the fee. Or if the city is going to consider requiring the tenant to pay, I think it raises a real issue due to the difficulties in enforcement as to whether or not there should be an actual monetary penalty if you don't comply with the ordinance, just because you're probably going to be spending a lot more money to try and enforce it than you're actually going to bring in on the back end. And then finally, I'll say, and I don't know that that we would have a lot of difficulty dealing with the claim that where you're treating a landlord differently than other property owners in Frankfort, where you charge a homeowner, you actually require him or her to pay for the garbage fee and require him to comply with the garbage program, where you don't require a landlord owner to pay the garbage fee and comply with the garbage program requirements. An argument could be made that you're treating people that are in the same category differently, and is there a rational basis for doing so under the law? I think that we could probably prevail on such a claim, but a homeowner / resident certainly can make an argument that, hey, if you're not making the landlord, property owner, pay his garbage fee and comply with the ordinance, and he can transfer that to someone else, why are you making me pay?
A couple of things. In regards to the plant board, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not hearing any discussion of trying to reopen the idea of the planning board handling billing for us. But in terms of some of this goes back to the discussion we had last week about code enforcement of rental property across the board, and how we identify, in particular, how do we identify illicit landlords, or landlords who have rental property who aren't, sharing that information with the city and getting their regular inspections. I know this is kind of a separate subject, but and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the point that Mr. Bullock's making is that there is one entity in town who knows who lives where, and who knows who owns a property, but who also knows if somebody other than the property owner is living there, and that's the plant board. The plant board has data and information that could answer a lot of these questions for us if they would only share that information with us, which,
Along those lines, they used to do that.
yeah.
So, because they shared it with planning and zoning so that they knew to come out and do a new inspection when the tenants changed. So, and that's all they did is give them the information. It was heavily weighted on the cable.
That strikes me as information to be very valuable to us.
Should I come forward?
So we can pick you up on that.
My name is Donna Hacker. I only have one question for you. How is this handled in other communities? Other communities that have similar curbside pickup and containerized collection?
Might be a better question for Tom.
And while Tom's coming up, I know that Lexington actually has it as a tax. So in some neighborhoods, it's included on their tax bill.
Yes, some communities put it yearly on the tax bill. Some charge $12 to $25 or $30 a month billed to the tenant. I think it depends on who's billing the utility. And with a monthly bill, of course, it's easier to bill it to the tenant than the owner. We only bill once every 6 months.
That does, some of that was discussed last year when we were all together, because the fact that we send the bill out every 6 months does make it a little more difficult to, I mean, let's say you've got a property, hypothetically, let's say you've got a property that actually sees 3 tenants in 1 year, that has 3 or 4 people rent for 3 or 4 months apiece. It gets pretty hard for that biannual bill to get split out accordingly. If the billing were monthly, which is administratively much more costly, then that gets really doable. And that's one of the reasons we were looking at having the plant board handle the billing in the first place, because they already send out a monthly bill to every household. But obviously the plant board doesn't want to do that. Although it seems to me that there is, I mean, this is a fee for service provided. So in terms of any questions about the legality of treating rental property owners different from homeowners, I think there's ample precedent in other communities and in this community for charging a fee for service to the person who's actually using the service. That doesn't strike me as being odd or illegal at all. Another note just on the philosophy of enforcement. I realize it is harder, and this is, I guess, actually more a comment for the rest of the commission. I realize that it's more difficult to enforce this kind of thing against tenants than landlords. And we've kind of talked about this thing before, but we have a number of laws on the books across the board that are very difficult to enforce. Noise ordinances come to mind, and the fireworks ordinance, where it's illegal to make X noise, to exceed a certain decibel threshold. People rarely ever get charged with that because we can't issue a charge against somebody. We can't actually charge somebody for violating a noise ordinance unless one of our officers actually witnesses the violation firsthand. It's the same thing with fireworks. I mean, there are types of fireworks that are illegal to set off. Nobody ever gets charged with it because the officer has to actually witness the violation occurring. But we don't let that difficulty of enforcement prevent us from having those laws on the books, because the mere fact that that law is on the books acts as an inherent suppressant of the activity. So, for example, we don't make all these crazy bottle rockets. If we make these crazy bottle rockets illegal, then we're going to have a lot less of them in the city, even if it is difficult to actually charge somebody and hold them accountable for violating. So that the fact that it would be difficult to enforce this kind of thing against a tenant, I actually don't think is a good reason to not pursue that direction as opposed to the landlords. Because, and as we're hearing from staff, I mean, most people in any given community, there's going to be a few people who are going to try to game the system, violate the law one way or the other. That's the way it is. But for the most part, I think most people try to play by the rules and try to respect the system. And I expect, and like we're already hearing from staff, the violations are already decreasing within the first couple of months, as we expect them to. Because for the most part, it's just a public education thing. For the most part, as people understand what the expectations are, then they're going to comply with them. And really blunt terms, anybody who's fined $20 for something, most people don't go so far into most people don't think, well, what are the consequences of paying or not paying? Most people, cuss and feel bad and pay their fine and don't think about whether or not there's some way to avoid the law actually applying to them.
Okay. I'm not real sure what your procedures are, but as we mentioned, time is of the essence. So if it is appropriate, if this work session could pass the proposed amendment onto the full commission meeting, so that if appropriate, if you should decide to do so, you could give a first reading at that time, we would appreciate that.
If we can come to an agreement in time, there's no reason we can't pass something. We had to have two public readings, before we can actually vote on something. And the way we have orders in place in the city that, without having a special call meeting, that prevent us from even having more than one official reading a month. Having said that, we can always call a special meeting just to hear a first reading of an ordinance. So if we can come to an agreement within the next 2, 3, even 4 weeks, that gives us time to actually pass an ordinance change by the end of next month.
We will be happy to work with you, or whoever you designate as you see fit.
Yeah.
This is more to the staff. Okay, in section 50.13, in subsection A, it says, talks about the notice of violation. It says, notices shall be issued by posting the notice on the door of the residence or by sending the notice by first-class mail to owner. What criteria is being used to determine whether that someone's going to put that on the door or send it to the owner?
We put a notice on the can and then we send the letter. We do both. We don't go to the door.
Well, I guess my concern is it doesn't say anything about putting notice on a can. And
It says or.
doesn't say.
So we have elected to send everyone the notice in the mail.
It doesn't say put it on a can, it says on the door. Am I missing that?
On the door or send the person.
Right, it said put it on the can.
They're also sending a letter, so they're replying.
But my question is, it's, I would think, what if the letter doesn't get there? The person, let's say for example, I'll use Mr. Bull, and I'm his tenant, so I'll be the person who puts the trash can out. And because I have the 35-gallon can, and I can't get the bag to go down in there because the inside of it sort of sticks in, you know what I'm talking about? And so the top stays open, and then it closes all the way, and it violates another section of the ordinance where it says it's not completely closed. And as a tenant, I'm thinking, okay, I got the trash can out here, I got my bag in there, but it's open a little bit, or because the trash, this is real life, because the trash sort of doesn't settle in, pushes the lid back up, and I don't know it, and go in the house, and next day they come by and it's open, and somebody says to give that citation, they put it on the trash can. I might see it, but I don't care. you never get it, and the mail, for some reason, your letter doesn't get to you, you're gonna get fined. And you're not gonna, you may miss the deadline to even respond, which increases it by tax on 18%. So I guess that's my concern about that. It doesn't say anything at all about, it doesn't give us the authority to put it on a can. It says, "Go put it on the door." I mean, it says shall be issued by posting a notice on the door of the residence or by sending a notice by first class mail. Even if we do both, we still don't have the authority to put that on the can. I'll ask my question to solicitors is,
The way the ordinance is written, all the city has to do is to put the notice in first-class mail. And by putting the notice in first-class mail, they have satisfied the requirements of the ordinance. And so they're in full compliance at that point. If the Public Works wants to go further, one step further, and place the notice on the trash can, they're certainly entitled to do so. And I believe that method was selected particularly due to issues with apartments, because there's no way, it's very difficult to tell which door is connected with the offending container. But again, by sending the notice by first-class mail, they were in full compliance with the ordinance.
okay, I guess my further question is though, does that mean if Mr. Bullock wanted to argue as an attorney, I doubt he would if he might, where it says, well, that's not constructive notice by putting it on there. They didn't put it, they put it on a trash can and they sent the mail, sent the notice. But for whatever reason, I know, and we both know that, by class construction, notice by first class mail, etc. If you don't get it, they can say, well, we're sorry you did it, we put it on the trash can.
I don't think they have an issue with putting it on the can if the landlord says, I never received the notice. Putting it on the can by itself is not sufficient.
That's what I'm saying, I don't think it's constructive.
Certainly, sending it in first-class mail satisfies the requirements of the ordinance. And so once we've done that, as long as we use the proper address, then we've complied with the ordinance. So, I guess if the city commission wishes to do so, could certainly tell the Public Works Department to stop putting the notices on the cans too.
No, that's a service to this notice. And if we're gonna take the position that notice by mail, I mean, that runs way deeper than the garbage program.
Right, also
We're gonna take the position that mail is an adequate way to notify property owners.
No, I think that, so they could argue, I'm trying to say they could argue, I would think.
If it goes to court, we'll argue everything.
That's what I was thinking. That's why that was my point.
Mr. May, Mr. Bullock's a good lawyer, he'll raise all these kind of arguments.
I know that, that's why I just wanted to put it.
I think, I saw Commissioner Turner had a comment, and I see two more sitting in comments.
I just wanted to address a couple of issues with regards to putting the note on the can versus the door. With all these criminal bank robbers who are taking the trash and spreading them around, they could certainly go and steal the note from the door and be stuck in the same predicament that we were.
On their own back.
With regards to the city being able to even have the authority to put the tag on the can, as written in the ordinance, if I'm pretty sure I'm correct on this, Mr. Moore, but as written in the ordinance, the cans are the property of the city of Frankfort. So I think that would give you authority to do that at that point. And so those are just the two areas that I wanted to respond to that. One more thing to add is that I applaud Public Works for putting the note on the can, because I think that shows that they're going above and beyond what they have to do in terms of the letter of the ordinance. So I applaud you all for doing that, and also working with citizens to help them understand the program and moving forward.
Yes, I'm Renee Truitt, I'm a property owner here in the city of Frankfort, rental property owner. So I have a question about the constructive notice. It seems like y'all are having trouble addressing whether it's even rental property or not. So if you don't always know whether it's rental property or not, you're sending first-class notice to the property address, and I'm a landlord sitting somewhere else in the Franklin County, or don't even live here at all, I haven't had constructive notice. So that could pile up. You could have bills piling up, and then all of a sudden I've got a lien on my property 6 months or a year later. So I question using that strategy. I kind of like Commissioner Turner's idea of having some kind of system where you opt in or opt out. I know Mr. Bullock likes the one preference over the other, but being able to alert the city of the fact that it is a rental property or somehow get the landlord out of the middle makes a lot of sense to me. But I could be in the middle of it and not even know it.
If I may, the addresses that the city uses are obtained, I believe, from the property valuation assessor's office. So the thought is that most property owners will ensure that their property bills are being sent to them, so that the property tax bills are being sent to them, so they avoid that same issue with respect to property tax.
We had 2 more, but yeah, I think Carolyn had first.
Hi, I'm Carol Anthony. I'm with the Housing Authority of Frankfort. And first of all, I have a question, and then that'll depend on whether I follow up on that. I haven't seen any of the bills yet, the fines yet. There are probably 50 waiting for me when I get back. Do they specify which number can is being cited? So I've got 200 properties. How am I supposed to figure out who did that? Thank you. I mean, there's no way. So that's my one objection. I actually, as a large property owner, would rather deal with it and deal with it with my tenants. So I'm not thrilled about the ordinance, but I just think it's easier for me, and we do have a lot of turnover in public housing.
What if you had a system to where you could choose that?
If I knew which can was being cited, but if I don't, give me a break. And then the second thing is, I want to encourage you again, I know this is slightly off the subject we're about right now, encourage you again to rethink this 8 units per parcel, because I hope, when I go back, it doesn't affect these, but I think we're being pretty successful with it. We have one development with 30 and one development with 45 that you all were, that Public Works was very kind to go ahead and do in this program, and I think it's fairly successful. So I am, and I've complained about this to you, Commissioner Wilder, and to Mr. Goins. We are paying for one development more than what we were paying with the original trash pickup. It's very difficult. Our money, everybody's money's being cut. HUD money is so scarce. We are not getting any subsidy this year. We're having to use all of our reserves. So to add $14,000 a year just for one development for trash pickup with a private company, it's just disastrous for us. So I really hope that you'll look at that. I hope you think about our poor people in Leestown and maybe rethink that issue. Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. Before we move on to the next citizen comments, can I get Tom back on the agenda? Or Jeff, Tom and or Jeff. This question about the bill not specifying a cart, or the fine, the fine's not specifying which.
The serial number on the cart.
Is that something we can?
Yeah, we can start doing that.
In a case like that, it seems like a lot easier. That's all. Thanks.
May I add a suggestion?
Sure.
It would be helpful if there was a sticker of some sort on the can which would designate which 51A or 51B, which property it is that the can belongs to. And then conceivably, if that can is in violation, you know which tenant it is. As a matter of fact, you could actually have a can with a number and a way of writing on that what the new tenant's name is, and then just put another sticker on top of it each time. But right now, the numbers are meaningless to all of us.
We know which serial numbers are associated with which address. I mean, that's just a database.
Yes.
That's a pretty quick lookup, yeah.
Quick.
Would it be feasible when actually sending, I mean, let's just say under the current ordinance, under the current circumstance, you send a fine to, let's say, Mr. Bullock has 20 out properties, he gets a notice fining, he gets the actual $25 fine in relation to a violation in one of those properties. Can we just tell him which address? Can we just give him the address?
You mean the actual unit that that can is assigned to?
Yeah.
Yes, on the invoice. Yes.
And on the notice?
We can give you the,
Give it to her straight.
well, it depends on what the commission wants to do about the personnel. I mean, the time to go back and cross-reference all that takes a lot of time to take the property that can is on, find the property owner, and then find out which tenant, based on the serial number.
Well, then it seems to me that the solution, again, is to just transfer the onus to the tenant. And then the notice just gets sent directly to, let's say Robert Bullock has 20 different tenants, I'm making these numbers up, obviously. Let's say he's got 20 different tenants. And let's say he just farms out the responsibility to all 20 of those tenants. And so then when the fine and the notice come in, instead of sending anything to Mr. Bullock passed along to the tenants, we just send it directly to the address associated with that particular card, which is the same thing we do now, right? As in, we just send it to the address associated with the card in our database.
Well, right now we send it to the property owner of that address.
Well, that's because that is
But
the
then we have to
address
switch.
associated, but if we can just switch things around to associate the right addresses, then frankly, we can send out the same notices we do now. We wouldn't even have to specify anything more than the serial number.
I think some of the things that before we would go forward, we need to sit down and look at what this change affects how we do what we do, how,
Sure.
in your instructions to us as far as if someone's not in compliance, what you want us to do and how is that going to look down the road. Be nice to think that through before.
Of course, I did. Do you think we can actually go ahead and start thinking through some of that stuff?
Yeah.
It'd be good to get some feedback on what this agreement would look like to transfer responsibility, what that would mean for staff in terms of billing. That's a question for Steve's department as well. And then the questions that you have. But if you could, we could get an idea at our first work session next month. That's 3 weeks or 4 weeks. But that should be enough time to.
We can come up with a list of questions.
Okay. In terms, we're operating with a bare quorum with the commission here today. So for the most part, all we're going to be able to do today is hear your all's concerns and get some balls rolling in terms of the questions we want to answer. I doubt we have enough on hand to go ahead and come to any kind of solid agreements of any sort.
May we have it on the next commission meeting's agenda?
I'm happy to go ahead and pick this up. I'm happy to pick this up again at our next work session.
Yeah. The work session, or I'm talking about the full commission meeting?
Oh, well, this is a rare commission meeting that isn't a meeting of the full commission. We have one voting meeting a month where we actually vote on stuff. But the general rule, we hold our discussion during work session. Our next work session is scheduled for April 9th.
What time?
At 5:00 p.m. here at City Hall. I'm happy to go ahead and request that we add this same discussion item to that agenda. One thing, I know there were some more comments, and we'll get right to it.
I'm not being early.
Okay, good. Did you be in the wrong place if you were?
Yes, for sure.
In terms of this, there does seem to be one basic question. I guess I'd like to ask us to go ahead and sound off on it a little bit, between whether or not we should go ahead and by ordinance transfer the onus to the tenants wholesale, and have the landlords opt in to responsibility, or whether or not we should do it the other way around, where the landlords can opt out of the responsibility and transfer it to the tenants. And I hear what Mr. Bullock's saying, for a number of reasons, including internal administrative reasons. I think it would be a lot better for it to be an opt-in program, where any landlords and tenants that want can assume responsibility for the tenants, but where the default setting is responsibility to the property owner. Because by default, we know what are we saying with the property owner?
The default is what again, please?
So the default is responsibility to the property owner, but we have the mechanism in place that.
So it's a negative option for the property owner.
Yes.
He has to get a sheet signed at the time that he rents to somebody and see that it's turned into the city in order not to be responsible for violations. Is that correct?
Right, versus the way it is now, where you're going to be responsible for the violation.
I understand. It's better than, it's better than what we got now. You know, I guess our preference would be just the other way around. We're willing to talk.
I understand that would be your preference.
Yeah.
The reason I think we would really have to do it this way is, we have instances, again, going back to the plant board data and whatnot, we have instances where we aren't even sure whether or not there is a tenant or who the tenant is. We always know who the property owner is. And so that gives us a constant peg to hang our hat on. If we make the default the tenant, then there are so many holes in that, because we don't even know always who the tenants are, whether or not there are tenants, et cetera. We always know who the property owner is. So that way the default is a catch-all.
I have a hard time with
I think we had some more citizen comments.
Robert Roach, I'm a landlord. I just had a couple of quick things. First off, I like what Mr. Bullock has, but as crazy as it sounds, I think when Mr. Hackbar was up here, his option one is the one to go with, which is to not fine at all, and to take a period of time, and y'all probably already talked about this, I haven't been to all of them, so I don't know, but to take the rest of this year or a period of time that the City Commission would agree to continue to educate and continue to get things straight, because I think it's a mess, and I don't think the things that we talked about are going to work. I own a lot of rental property, and unfortunately, I pay the utilities on a lot of them, so the idea that you're going to get the data from FPB and then know where tenants live is not accurate. You'll get probably 2/3 to 3/4 of the tenants in the city. The other parts go directly to the landlord. I do think the tenants bear the responsibility for the cost. I'm all for that. But I think that given the 40 different viewpoints that I've heard today, and many people have talked themselves and said 2 or 3 different things, I suspect that you all might want to just give this thing a timeout to where you're not charging people for something, and then try to figure out a way to do it more effectively, because my guess is that everything we've heard today won't work. And no offense to anybody, and that you're going to end up with an even bigger mess than you've already got. And that maybe with time and with people having a higher level of compliance, that there may be a better chance to come up with something that makes a little bit more sense. And then as far as the cross-reference, that idea, I guess my question would be, why was there not a, I realize there's some sort of a number on the trash can, but was there any thought given to having that coincide with the number that, like, for example, if I have an 8-plex, was there any thought to say, well, unit 1 has this trash can, unit 2 has this one, unit 3 has this one, and then have a database so that you could effectively monitor it?
I don't know how the breakdown is in a multi-unit building. I mean, but in effect, all of that, for the most part, all of that information is in the database. And we do know which
unit has which trash can?
Yeah, but I don't know how that breaks down into an 8-plex.
I think when the contractor passed those out, they would come to a particular property, and if it was a fourplex, they wrote with a Sharpie on top of the lid and set it up, and that's not marked permanently because we didn't permanently mark the cans, and we've had over 1,000 switch outs already. So, you know, we're just trying to keep up with that.
But we do have a digital database, and I'm correct in understanding that if we look at the serial number on a cart, then we know which very
unit it
particular
is.
residential unit that cart belongs to.
Okay. I wonder, but anyway, I hope that's right.
Well, we know who it was assigned to.
That's what I meant.
That's we don't know if there's 8 plex and everybody's got a 32.
Yeah, see, I don't think that's what I'm saying. I don't think that's likely to happen. I don't know if y'all given that any thought, in other words, to amend the ordinance to give a longer trial period where there's no fines? And you just would continue with the sticker and continue with the letter, but not have any fines until...
Frankly, I would be concerned that if we publicly announce that there are no consequences for not complying with the program, that we would immediately revert back to having a lot of, right, that nobody would comply, nor can I imagine why they would comply. If it were official, you know, if we officially waived that. Although I'm glad you reminded me, and this is a kind of separate note, but just for everybody's information, the city has scheduled 4 free pickup days a year, you know, for spring cleaning and after Christmas, etc. And so this week, it's this week, right? Everything, all bets are off this week. So anybody can send anything they want to the curb this week, and we'll pick it up. So that. Yeah, right. FYI. Sorry, I know that wasn't.
That's all right. That's all I had.
Mr. Wilder, may I point out that you don't want to get hung up on just the cans, because of equal importance are the plastic bags that get set out. And they're the ones you can't just look at it because it doesn't have a number on it. So you're not sure who put the plastic bag out. And I am reasonably sure, well, I know in one instance I had somebody put their plastic bag on somebody else's property.
And you're talking about not a city bag, you're talking about just a Walmart bag.
Well, but even the city bag, I mean, I'm not real clear why you're requiring a special bag.
Yeah, no, I have to explain that. So, the whole purpose of the program in a nutshell is to charge for garbage collection according to how much gets thrown away. So there's a financial incentive to produce less waste and recycle more. I mean, that's the program in a nutshell. And from a fiscal standpoint, the benefit to the city is a reduction in tipping fees and an increase in recycling revenue. And so if we just distributed the cart, but then also let people set out whatever, you know, normal plastic bags they wanted to, then it would be way too easy to game the system. Folks could set out, everybody could get the small free cart, set out 5 trash bags a week, and the program, I mean, it literally wouldn't work at all. So there has to be some cost associated with the actual setting out of trash. Along those lines, in terms of the city bags, it doesn't matter who sets them where, because we're going to pick them up and they'll be in compliance no matter what's in them. And in terms of the other bags, you know, somebody's setting out a Walmart bag here or there, that's the kind of thing where, not always, but there often is some kind of verifiable information in there. And that's when you have somebody going through, you know, with the gloves on, that's the sort of thing they're looking for. Most illegal dumping actually isn't residential. Most, you know, as in across the board, across the country, even across the county, most illegal dumping comes from businesses instead of residential property. And that's kind of irrelevant to the paper program because we don't collect them.
On the cans again, one other point of information, it is usually not a problem that the can isn't big enough. The problem is people aren't setting their cans out on a regular basis, so their garbage is piling up, and then they set it all out at one time.
Well, for what it's worth, that's why my family has the medium-sized cart. We haven't produced much waste. I mean, we could get by with the small one, but the $4 a month is still cheaper than what we were paying before, and it gives us that flex. So we missed garbage. We failed to set it out last week, and it's a weight off our shoulders. But that's useful. Anybody have any more comments before we take back to the commission? Yeah.
I'm reading.
If we could get you up here, just for the record, if you don't mind. Or we can bring the mic to you.
My name's Reed Bishop, and I'm a legal landlord. But I think most of us would agree with what Mr. Moore said is all the enforcement difficulty. But I think we have less avenues than the city does on some of these same issues. Like, my understanding is you can go to the post office and get forwarding addresses. We can't do that unless we pay somebody that has that authority, and there's lots of issues like that. So we may come to the point where the only way we can enforce it, if we have a tenant who doesn't want to comply, and he doesn't, maybe our only avenue that's left to us is we have to evict a tenant that in all other ways is a good tenant. That's
a fair point. Anybody have any other thoughts? About anything? So then we'll pick this up again on the 9th, and we'll ask you all to come back to us with, we'll ask you to come back with a draft, with an actual draft of your proposal. We'll have to ask what kind of time frame.
As far as writing the actual ordinance, I think you would do that, but
Right.
changes.
On Mr. Bullock's ordinance, I would tweak this for you all to look at as far as the language of any agreement between the landlord and the tenant. We can certainly draft that. I would point out that a lot of folks, including myself, are going to be gone the week, that first week in April, because that's spring break.
Sure.
So we'll try and get that done before people leave.
We have to work with Mr. Moore and the opportunity to.
Sure. I really do appreciate you all coming to the table with a draft and a
Appreciate your
suggestion.
courtesy in this matter.
Before we, as we move on to the next, actually not requested, just a 2-minute recess.
Sure.
We need to vote on that. Recess.
You want to vote?
You can just call it.
Please do that voice vote.
Yeah.
We'll call a voice vote on it. Sure. 2-minute recess, all in favor? Aye. Aye.
Yes.
I'm not
Shut it off. Their policy doesn't, your policy doesn't. You can buy a secondary medical policy. We sell oh, yeah. It has limits. It's $1,000 for